Welcome, Senior English B. Today we are instructing on My Last Duchess, the Robert Browning offering. In the place that I want to begin, and you should be now on page 926 of your hymnal, page 926. The place that I want to begin is actually a 2B. I want to talk about real quickly a form of poetry that becomes very popular in the Victorian age. Let's play this game. Just as a form of review, what was the primary forms of poetry that you saw in the Romantic period? Go ahead and write that down. What's it, McGee? What's that? What? Yes, that's right. The Crucible is the one for juniors. Right. Thanks, Pop. What would you qualify as the Romantic period's form of choice, Mr. Nelson? Do you recall? No. There were a number of those poems that even had the word in the title. Do you remember? Odes. You're right, odes. Now, that is not to say that Chris Nicholas is incorrect when she says that we also want to make sure that we remember they wrote in sonnet form quite a bit, right? But the ode is going to be a very popular form of writing in the Romantic period. The dramatic monologue becomes a very popular form of writing in the Victorian period. Now, what is a dramatic monologue? Anybody want to take a stab at this one? What is a dramatic monologue? First of all, if I'm having a dialogue with Mr. Keeley, two people talking, then Mr. Keeley, what is a monologue? A single person talking, outstanding. A single person talking. So what is the dramatic part of it then? Well, a dramatic monologue asks you to imagine a certain kind of dramatic context that you begin to understand or infer as you read the poem. Give me an example of a dramatic monologue by the great poet Tennyson. Don't say it right. We're working, by the way, here now at either 2B or 3A. What is a dramatic monologue? It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags matched with an aged wife I meet and dole unequal laws into a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. I cannot rest from travels. I will drink life to the lees. All times I've enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly. I'm going until somebody tells me, what's the name of the poem we're working with? Ulysses. It is Ulysses. You are assuming, as the reader, that you know that the I cannot rest from travels speaker is not Tennyson, but rather the old hero Ulysses. So you kind of assume a certain type of persona is the one speaking this dramatic monologue. So there is a context. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. He's actually speaking to the very sailors who are about to get on the boat and travel for his last journey with him. Of course, we understood that to some degree, Tennyson is kind of offering a hope to the English people who are going through some dynamic change. You'll remember our observations regarding Mr. Nelson and his progeny in the shoe factory story. Yes? Browning is the greatest of the artisans of the dramatic monologue, however. Even superior to Tennyson. He will offer us more than two, although your hymnal will give us two. The first we will look at will be Last Duchess. The second we will look at will be Porphyra's Lover, that somewhat whacked out story that if you've not read, you'll want to have read this evening before you come to class tomorrow. Maybe one or two of you can pick up some points tomorrow off test sheets if you arrive with annotations already filled out. The dramatic monologue, My Last Duchess, then, will ask of us that we try to figure out, can you write this in your notes at 2B? Reading this poem is like a puzzle of sorts, where you try to figure out some things that are going on. Much is being said that's not actually said. We will get into this conversation pretty quickly, and some of you will find offense in this poem. I'm sorry, but that will be the way it is. This poem always leads to a bit of controversy as we get into this discussion. Let's begin, however, first of all, by backtracking for one brief moment so that I can remind you one more time why we are here. It seems to me necessary, because if we're not careful, we will simply find ourselves on a Tuesday pretending it's a Monday, coming to school with our less than open eyes, waiting for one more hour to somehow pass so that we can get to second hour, so that we can get to the end of the day, the end of the month, the end of the semester, to find somehow graduation. And we will forget that we're here for a real clear purpose, and that is to learn how to read. For those of us who know that our future is intricately linked to our education post-high school, I'm telling you, your capacity to read is everything. So with that in mind, let's now turn to Last Duchess. Let's try to focus intellectually for a few moments, and let's try to find a way to derive some information from the text. I'll say it this way. If you can read this kind of, dare I say it, crap, and figure out some sense of what it's saying, you will be able to read much better your biology, your history, your psychology at the next level. Let's begin, first of all, with an oral reading of the text. But before we do that, a little bit of background will help you. We in America are not so accustomed to the notion of the Duke and the Duchess as positions. What is a Duke or a Duchess? Do we understand at all what this is all about? Anybody know what we're talking about? In Europe, there are these people who are born billionaires. We're accustomed to that in our country. But it's not because their daddy owns a factory. Rather, their daddy has a name. And that name is so old that monies, large amounts of monies, will attend. Are you ready for this? There are homes in Europe that are bigger than the town of Warland. Okay? There are homes in Europe, right? In terms of the estate and the holdings, bigger than the town of Warland. You could draw a circle around the estate of some of these homes, and it's going to be bigger than the town of Warland. Much bigger, in fact. Miles bigger. Okay? There are homes that to get to these homes, you have to get across bridges because there's fake lakes that have been created. Okay? You see what I'm saying? These homes, these oftentimes they're castles, were handed down from generation to generation. And you inherit this kind of wealth. Okay? You don't go to a job to make this kind of money. Do you got me? Now, a duke is the male. His wife is referred to as the Duchess. Okay? The title of this poem, though, is My Last Duchess. Now, for example, if I were just musing aloud and I were to say, boy, you know, sometimes I miss my last wife. Why did Lang kind of laugh about that? What is assumed in my saying my last wife? What, first of all, is assumed about her? Is she living or not living? Well, yeah, right. If I call her my last wife, there's some assumption that she's not around anymore, right? I would call her my current wife, if that were the case. The fact that I also say my last wife, I've been thinking a lot about my last wife, seems to, in a subtle way, suggest what?
There's more than one.
That's right. There's been more than one wife. I just happen to know that the last one in that order. See what I'm saying? Okay. So to that degree, my last Duchess is already going to be laden with a certain kind of irony. Again, reading this poem is a puzzle. There will be one person speaking, and the entire poem will just be him speaking. It will be up to you, the reader, to begin to deduce two things. You might want to write this down. Two things you've got to try to figure out in this puzzle poem. One, who is this guy speaking? Now, clearly he's a duke. That we'll know from the title already. Secondly, who is he speaking to and why? There will be somebody else he's talking to. We won't know who this cat is. We have to infer it. And we'll only understand it by the end of the poem. All right? Now, we'll read the poem, and then we will come back to exegete. It will help you if you're following on page 926. My Last Duchess. Follow word for word. Use the tip of your pen if you need to focus to follow along. If you are able to stay up with my reading of this poem, then you know that your fluency of reading is better. It's getting better. If, on the other hand, you're falling behind as I'm reading, you can't stay up with the words and your pen can't quite follow the words, then you know you have to continue to work on your fluency. Let's take a look. My Last Duchess. That's my last Duchess, painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now, Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said, Frau Pandolf, by design. For never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I. And seemed as they would ask me if they durst, how such a glance came there, so not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only, call that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one. My favor at her breast, the drooping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one and say, just this or that in you disgusts me, here you miss or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below, then. I repeat, the Count, your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Now we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Now it is altogether possible that as we begin an exegesis of a poem like this, that you will find yourself in the familiar territory that you found yourself in with Tintern Abbey, where some of the words make sense to you, but Mr. McGee could have, for all intents and purposes, stood up here in front of you and gone, "Blah, blah, blah, blah," and you would have known about as much as you now know. Again, we're here to learn to read. That you will learn something about poetry and poetic interpretation I'm pleased about, and you will. By the end of the hour, you'll know what this poem means. But I'm far more interested in you answering this simple question: if you had to read this poem on your own sitting in a dorm room, because you know that the examination is coming tomorrow and your future is linked to the grade that you receive on the examination, how well are you going to be able to figure out what it is that you're looking at? Let's go back and begin the process of exegesis. You kind of follow the way I model, the way I try to introduce to you the way to read the poem. Notice that first of all he says, making it very clear to the reader, my last wife is now dead. But the way that he says it is, I have this painting on the wall. Now this painting on the wall is always covered. Notice he says, I am the only one who ever puts aside the curtain to let anyone see my last wife, my last Duchess. Right away, what do you begin to kind of learn about this guy? Don't say it, write it. What do you begin to kind of learn about this guy right away? Notice that he says, ah, yes, I did say Frau Pandolf as the painter who made this very famous, it's a very famous painter. Yes, I did. Now, for those of you who maybe don't understand, you've probably seen this if you've ever visited, for example, the gallery. In the early days, you didn't have the capacity of whipping out your phone or your iPod and taking a photograph. And so the only way that you had any record for posterity of what is an individual looked like was a painting. And so individuals were paid substantial amounts of money to come and to paint the most wealthy individuals. Why? Because it could take up to 3 months or more to paint a person's likeness. That individual would have to sit still for long periods of time, not moving, and you would put the individual in the exact same place every time to come back to paint. And then you would paint the image of the person. Of course, maybe the most famous of these is the famous Da Vinci Mona Lisa, yes? That very famous portrait. These portraits could take a long time depending upon the size. There are portraits that are larger than this wall in terms of its height, right? I mean, they would sometimes make these prodigious size portraits and then others smaller. Notice he will begin. That's my Last Duchess painted on the wall. I call that piece a wonder now. See the word now. She's not around anymore. In other words, the painting is quite remarkable. The painting is remarkably exact. It looks so natural that individuals who look at the painting point out right away, that's amazing. The job Frau Pendolf did. For example, there is little flush here in her cheeks that make it look like she's real. Like you could reach out and touch the painting and she's like there. Notice he makes the observation. Frau Pendolf's hands worked busily a day and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? So he's got this painting on a wall with a curtain over it, and then he's got a bench there or a chair where you can actually sit and look at the painting, right? And he says, you want to sit? You can look for a while. I will let you look. Notice he keeps saying it. I said Frau Pendolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, her face, the depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turned, notice the parenthetic, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as if they would ask if they durst, how such a glance came there. So not the first are you to turn and ask thus. In other words, whoa, this woman, in other words, it's code language for this woman stunning, physically stunning. We would say in our parlance today, hot, you see. But the painter caught a certain kind of glance, as if she were maybe looking for a split moment away. And he says, you're not the first one to have asked me about this amazing picture that has been painted. Now he's going to begin to talk about his wife. It is here that we will begin to deduce all kinds of interesting things about this individual's character. Let's take a look. Notice what he says. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only, call that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Uh-oh. He says, yeah. She has a spot in her cheek, a little bit of blush. But it wasn't my presence only that called that into her cheek. Keep reading. Perhaps Frau Pendolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much. Maybe, in other words, the artist came up and said, we're not seeing enough skin. Let's pull this back here a bit so we can see more of your arm. Or, keep reading, paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. In other words, maybe we should show a bit more here as well. What is it that the husband is saying about his wife in regards to this look? Yeah, she has a pretty seductive look, but I can't guarantee you that it came just because I was standing in the room. We're only beginning. We've got a few more lines to go. Let's keep reading. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. And now I want you to point out, starting at line 21 or so, how it's almost as if he looks off into the, clear blue. And he begins to talk out loud about his last wife and what it is that he says about her. Hello? It's not so much what he says about her. It's far more interesting what we deduce about him. Let's take a look at what he says about his last wife. She had a heart. Notice the dash. It's brilliant. I'm telling you, Browning is brilliant at the construction here. She had a heart. It's like he can't come up with the right language. How shall I say? Too soon made glad. Too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Whoa. What did you just read? What does he say about her? She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad. It was at this point, many years ago, that a young lady in the room said, I know exactly what he's saying, because I had a boyfriend just like this. And we all went, what are you talking about? And she said, by my very nature, I like to smile. In fact, when he began to date me, he said my smile was the reason that he liked me so much. But there I was, sitting on the chair out there during lunch with him. We'd been dating for some time. And a group of boys came walking down the hall, and they smiled at me. I smiled back. And he went, what was that? She went, what was what? What are you talking? That, what you just did, what was that? She said, well, what did I just do? He said, you know exactly what you just did. In front of me, you smiled at another boy. To which she said, I smile at everyone. He said, not anymore. And she went, what do you mean, not anymore? Not anymore. You smile at me. You don't smile at other boys anymore. She said, I know exactly what he's talking about here. The argument is a simple one. She smiled a lot. That's okay. But she smiled too much at anything other than me. She was too happy. Keep reading. We're going to begin to learn a lot about our Duke here. Some of you are not going to like him very much before the end of this poem. Let's take a look at what he has to say. Search was all one, line 25. My favor at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherry some officious fool brought in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She got happy about everything. She got happy about me being next to her, but she was just as happy about riding on some silly pony, or just as happy about some little bit of cherries that some idiot broke off from a tree and gave to her. She was happy all the time. Not just when she was with me, all the time. She thanked men. Good. But thanked, notice the dashes. It's as if he's trying to come up with a way to say it. But thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-year-old name with anybody's gift. A 900-year-old name? What has he just said?
Like his name.
He's pretty wealthy.
Any specialer than
He thought of the marriage to her as his gift to her. Cruz Nicholas just went like this. If you are at all an astute reader of this poem, you begin to kind of go, whoa, whoa, whoa. He says, she thanked guys by smiling at them. She did not understand the rules of the game. As a matter of fact, our young female student said that her boyfriend, before she broke up with him, gee, I wonder why, she said that her boyfriend made this very clear. You can smile all you want to until you have a guy. And then, no smiling at guys. That is against the rules. His comment to her was, you should know better. You should know that. A girl should know she does not smile to other guys when she's with a guy. Is there any truth to that today? Do you think, Mr. Lang says there are guys at Warren High School that actually would get offended if their girlfriend smiled at another guy. Wait a minute, is it in front of them that it's the violation?
If she's sitting next to me and she has a big old grin on her face when a whole bunch of dudes walk by, I'm going to be busting some heads up. That's for sure. I'm a very angry person.
Let's pay attention to Mr. Lang's language. Let's pay attention to Mr. Lang's language. Did you hear him say busting some heads up? We'll want to hold on to that little phrase, cute as it is, as we move on into our reading here. Notice that this speaker of this poem is going to make a fairly self-evident kind of observation. I have the 900-year-old name. I am the big shot. She should have known better than to smile at everyone in the same way. Wait a minute, we have a word for guys like this. What is the word for guys like this? These guys are what? Jealous. That's right. This is a jealous man, isn't it? We may want to write this down. Hello? Let's just point out something brilliant about Browning. Notice he is creating a character. Browning himself, the poet, never calls this guy jealous. He just gives us the picture of a jealous husband. Keep reading. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? He says, I was way, way above making any observations about this. In other words, she should have known better. Take a look. Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one and say, just this or that in you disgusts me, here you miss or there exceed the mark. He says, I could have said to her, things you do disgust me. Things you do miss the mark, not quite appropriate. He says, if I had had the skill of speech, of course, notice his brilliance of speech. right? He obviously had the skill of speech. His point will be, she should have known better. My speaking these words to her are beneath me. She should have known better than this. It is somehow an insult to me to say to my girl, you don't smile at other guys, if you will. Notice. And if she let herself be lessoned so, or plainly set her wits to yours forsooth and made excuse, even then, look at it, would be some stooping. And I choose never to stoop. What does the word stoop here mean? He says, I don't stoop. What does that mean? To say I don't stoop means what? Literally, what does stooping mean? Literally, what does physically stooping mean? It means to bow down. Yes, it means to bow down, literally. He's not talking, though, about literal stooping. What does he mean here? He says, if I had told her that what she was doing upset me, that would be stooping. And look what he says, I, sir, choose never to stoop.
Doesn't play at her level.
Bingo. I don't stoop. I'm way above that. I have a 900-year-old name. She should have known better. Any woman with me should have known better than that. Why? Because I have a 900-year-old name. That is to say, my family deserves that level of respect. She should have known that when she got involved. What? Keep thinking. She should have known that when she got involved. That is to say, when she what? Agreed to? Bingo. Bingo. She should have known that when she became my wife. That once she became my wife, no more of that foolishness. That's done. In other words, all of that really pretty look on the picture, yeah, that's a nice look, but that had very little to do with, what's he saying? That had little to do with me. That look of hers, that had little to do with, that's how she looked all the time. She always looked happy, whether she was with me or not. I could have talked about it, but that would be stooping, and I don't stoop. You got a phrase or two you want to attend to this guy already before we get on with this poem? What do you want to say about this guy? And see, here again, some of you are going to say, wow, you know what's interesting, in your first reading of this poem, I kind of missed one or two things that now all of a sudden I'm like ready to say about this guy. He is a serious 100%
Awesome.
A-hole.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Of course, hello. Let's do point out, and Browning was completely aware of this. Hello? Browning was completely aware of this. This poem might be read differently by different people. Do you hear what I just said? Browning was aware of this. This poem might be read differently by different readers. A male reader may have one view of this. A female reader may have a different view of this. Right? Let's keep going, though. I choose, sir, never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt. Now it's going to get nasty. Whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands. Then all small stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What did you just read? Go back and look at it again. This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. It's interesting to me how astute readers of this poem will pause at this line now and go, Notice, now wait a minute, stay with, hello, stay with me for one more second here, watch this. What is the antecedent to the pronoun this grew? What grew?
And she kept smiling.
Her smiling, keep going, what else?
His feelings.
His anger about it.
Hey,
I gave commands.
started. You need to quit.
All smiles stopped together.
Yeah.
There she stands as if alive. We then find out at the end of the poem that the guy he's talking to is a messenger for another wealthy family Because he's interested in his next bride.
Ooh,
A young girl who's waiting downstairs who he's about to go meet. And right before the end of the poem, he says, oh yeah, would you like to take a look at one more bronze that I also have as a work of art? In other words, his wives he treats as works of possession, huh? And if she, trophy wife, and if she begins to have an opinion of her own, I gave commands. All smiles stop together.
Oh my God.
There she stands as if alive. Whoa! See you back tomorrow. We'll talk about I used to love her, but I had to kill her. Did you guys ever hear that? Did you ever?